Kieran Hayes had always thought diplomacy would be boring, a life of endless meetings, polite handshakes, and formal words that sounded important but rarely meant anything. That was until he set foot on Sci-Fi Station, a massive hub floating in the middle of a star system far from Earth. Here, humans were newcomers, still strange to the various alien races that filled the station's corridors. Some were tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered like polished metal. Others had tentacles instead of arms or eyes that glowed softly in the dim lights. Every race had its own customs, and every custom seemed designed to confuse humans. Kieran had been warned about many things before arriving. He had been briefed on alien etiquette, their strange social cues, and the careful way they judged outsiders. But one warning had been repeated more than any other. Stay away from the Ylthari Queen. She chooses her company carefully, his advisor had said. She is brilliant, dangerous, and completely unpredictable. Most diplomats who attempt to impress her fail. Many of them never recover socially. It is better to avoid her entirely. Kieran had nodded politely, hiding the thrill in his chest. The warning had only made him more curious. A human who avoided challenges was not much of a diplomat, and Kieran had never been one to follow rules simply because someone said they existed. Sci-Fi Station was alive with movement, a vast maze of corridors, observation decks, and bustling markets. Alien merchants called out, offering strange foods and glowing objects. Security drones hovered silently above the floors, their sensors scanning every passerby. The air smelled faintly metallic, a mix of the station's life support and the many alien species living within it. Kieran moved through it all, trying not to look like the newcomer he was. Humans had a certain charm in these situations, a mix of confidence and audacity that many aliens found unusual. He relied on that charm now, hoping it would serve him well in the presence of the Ylthari Queen. He had been summoned to the Royal Hall for a preliminary meeting with the Queen's Council. The hall itself was a marvel, a blend of alien architecture and technology that made humans feel small. Silver columns spiraled toward the ceiling, twisting like liquid metal. Light flowed in patterns across the floor, creating shapes that shifted as one moved. At the far end of the hall sat a raised dais, glowing faintly with energy. The Queen's throne was not a simple chair but a complex structure of floating platforms and luminous panels, all orbiting in perfect harmony around her. Kieran entered cautiously, bowing slightly as he approached the designated area for visitors. He could feel the eyes of everyone in the room upon him. Ylthari courtiers moved with precise grace, their silver-scaled skin catching the light in flashes. Their faces were unreadable, as if they were observing and calculating every micro-expression he made. Some whispered to one another, glancing toward him, and then back at the dais. Then, she appeared. The Ylthari Queen moved through the room with a fluidity that seemed almost unreal. Her silver scales gleamed, and her eyes glowed with a pale, shifting light. She was taller than most humans, her body slim but powerful. Her movements were confident, controlled, and deliberate. Kieran felt a chill run down his spine. This was the being who had been described as brilliant and dangerous. This was the being he had been warned to avoid. Yet, instead of ignoring him or directing him elsewhere, she approached him directly. Kieran felt the air shift as she stopped a few steps away. For a moment, she simply observed him, tilting her head in a way that seemed to examine not just his face but his thoughts. Then, without a word, she lowered herself to sit on the edge of a floating platform next to him. The hall went silent. Even the murmuring courtiers ceased their whispers. Kieran's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had faced nervous negotiations and high-pressure meetings before, but this was different. The Queen's attention felt like a weight pressing on him, yet it was not hostile. It was curious, probing, almost like a test. He smiled politely, unsure if a human smile could even be interpreted correctly by the Ylthari. To his relief, she did not recoil or show disapproval. Instead, her glowing eyes seemed to flicker with interest. "You are unusual," she said finally. Her voice was soft, melodic, almost like music. "Most of your kind would have fled, or bowed repeatedly, or attempted some display of useless formality. You do neither. Hard, Kieran swallowed. I try to be honest, he said simply. It is easier than pretending to be something I am not. The Queen considered this, her gaze sharp but not unkind. Honesty, she murmured, is rare among diplomats. And humans, as I understand them, are. She paused, searching for a word. Unpredictable. Kieran chuckled lightly. I suppose we are. We often act on instinct rather than strict logic. It gets us into trouble sometimes, but it also helps us survive. For the first time, he noticed a flicker of amusement in her eyes. It was subtle, but unmistakable. The courtiers around them shifted uneasily. No human had ever earned a reaction like that from the Queen, let alone a small expression of amusement. Over the next few hours, Kieran found himself speaking with her about things no other diplomat had dared to discuss. She asked him questions about humanity, about why humans risked so much for curiosity or knowledge, about how they solved problems without relying solely on calculations or probabilities. Kieran answered carefully, using examples from Earth's history: explorers venturing into unknown lands, inventors taking risks to discover new technologies, soldiers fighting against impossible odds. The Queen listened, never interrupting, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him feel both exposed and understood. He began to sense that this was more than a casual conversation. This was a test, yes, but it was also a genuine interest. She was evaluating not just him, but humanity itself. At one point, she asked a question that stumped many of her previous visitors. If humans are so fragile, so limited compared to other species, why do they insist on placing themselves in danger? Why not calculate the odds and avoid risk entirely? Kieran paused, considering the best way to answer. He could have given a simple, logical answer. But humans were not always logical. Because, he said finally, sometimes the reward is worth the risk. And sometimes, the act of trying itself is more important than the outcome. We grow when we challenge ourselves. That is how we survive, in ways other species might not expect. The Queen tilted her head again, a gesture that Kieran had by now learned indicated interest. You speak with confidence, she said. Most would hide behind words they did not understand, afraid to risk being wrong. You do not. I think it is better to be wrong and learn than to be perfect and stagnant, Kieran replied. Her eyes seemed to glow brighter for a moment, and she leaned back slightly. Perhaps humans are not so simple as I believed. The rest of the day passed in a blur of observation, questioning, and cautious conversation. Kieran found himself forgetting the warnings he had received. The courtiers whispered and exchanged glances, but the Queen ignored them. She was focused entirely on him, on the strange, unpredictable human who had dared to meet her gaze without fear or hesitation. As evening approached, the hall's lights shifted to a soft, golden hue. Kieran realized he was tired but exhilarated. He had navigated conversations with beings who could sense thoughts, had answered questions designed to test not just his intelligence but his character, and had survived scrutiny from a creature far older and wiser than any human could hope to be. Yet, somehow, he had not only survived, he had impressed her. The Queen stood suddenly, her movements smooth and deliberate. You may stay, she said simply, and then walked away, leaving Kieran with a sense of awe and disbelief. He had expected dismissal, or a polite escort back to the human quarters. Instead, she had chosen to acknowledge him. Kieran stayed where he was, looking after her as she moved through the hall. For the first time, he felt that humans were not just observers in the galaxy, not just minor players in interstellar politics. Perhaps humans could stand alongside the greatest beings in existence. Perhaps humans could be recognized, respected, even admired. And as he left the hall later that evening, Kieran knew that his life had changed forever. He had been warned to stay away, but he had not. The alien Queen had chosen to sit beside him, to engage with him, and to see him not just as a human, but as something worth understanding. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating, and it was the beginning of a story that would challenge everything Kieran thought he knew about humanity's place in the stars. Kieran smiled to himself, walking back through the corridors of Sci-Fi Station. He felt a spark of excitement, a sense of purpose he had never known before. Humans were unpredictable, perhaps even fragile, but they were also brave, clever, and endlessly curious. And the Ylthari Queen had just discovered that firsthand. The next morning, Kieran woke to the soft hum of Sci-Fi Station, a sound that had become strangely comforting. The corridors were already alive with movement, merchants calling to one another, security drones hovering silently, and aliens of every shape and size moving with their practiced grace. Humans were still rare here, and Kieran felt their eyes on him as he walked. Some looked curious, others cautious, and a few openly impressed. Word of the previous day's encounter with the Ylthari Queen had spread quickly. He was escorted to a conference room, a smaller chamber with walls of translucent metal that displayed the swirling galaxies beyond. To Kieran's surprise, the Queen was already there. She stood near a window that overlooked the outer docks. Her silver-scaled hands folded as she watched a transport ship dock. When she noticed him, she turned smoothly and gestured for him to approach. "You came," she said simply. Her voice had the same melodic tone as before, but there was something lighter in it today, almost like curiosity rather than scrutiny. "I did," Kieran replied. "I wouldn't want to keep you waiting." She regarded him with a gaze that seemed to pierce through the walls of his mind. "Humans are persistent. Most would be intimidated after a day in my presence. Yet, you returned willingly." Kieran smiled. "I suppose I wanted to understand. And perhaps I wanted to see if you were as formidable as everyone says." A flicker of amusement passed through her glowing eyes. "Formidable," she repeated, the word rolling off her tongue as if tasting it for the first time. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I am only what others perceive me to be." Kieran tilted his head slightly, intrigued. "So, perception matters more than reality?" "Sometimes," she admitted. "Especially when dealing with beings who act based on instinct, not pure logic." The conversation that followed was unlike anything Kieran had ever experienced. Solara asked him questions, not about diplomacy, not about trade, but about humanity itself. She wanted to know why humans took risks, why they explored unknown planets despite the dangers, why they sought knowledge even when it offered no immediate advantage. Kieran answered carefully, speaking of Earth's explorers, inventors, and thinkers. He spoke of the human desire to understand, to create, and to endure. The Queen listened without interruption, her eyes never leaving him. At times, Kieran felt exposed, as if she could see his thoughts. Yet it was not an invasive feeling. It was challenging, almost stimulating. He realized that she was testing him, not with weapons or tricks, but with curiosity. "You humans are unpredictable," she said finally. "You act without always knowing the consequences. That can be dangerous, even foolish." "Yes," Kieran admitted, "it can be. But sometimes the risk is what allows us to succeed. We learn through trial, through experience, and through daring. Predictable beings survive in a world of order, but humans survive in chaos as well." Solara leaned back slightly, her eyes reflecting the swirling galaxies outside. "Perhaps that is why you are here, among the stars, while others remain confined to their predictable paths. Perhaps humans are adaptable in ways other species are not." Kieran felt a thrill of pride. Humans had been underestimated for centuries. Their strength measured only by physical ability or technological advancement. But here was the Queen of a powerful, ancient race recognizing a different kind of human strength, adaptability, courage, and ingenuity. The conversation shifted unexpectedly. Solara presented him with scenarios, complex puzzles designed to test reasoning and strategy. Many of her previous visitors had failed these tests, unable to move beyond rigid logic. Kieran, however, approached them differently. He relied on creativity, on intuition, on the ability to see connections that others might overlook. Each solution he proposed brought a subtle flicker of acknowledgement from the Queen. "You see patterns differently than I expected," she observed. "Most beings attempt to calculate every variable, every probability. You improvise. You trust yourself." "I suppose it comes from necessity," Kieran said. "Humans have always had to make do with what they have. We adapt. We improvise, and sometimes we succeed in ways that seem impossible." For a moment, there was silence between them. Kieran felt the weight of her attention, a presence so intense that it made every nerve in his body tingle. Yet it was not oppressive. It was invigorating. He realized that the Queen was not merely testing him, she was learning from him, just as he was learning from her. Hours passed, and Kieran found himself losing track of time. He spoke of human emotions, of their curiosity, their determination, their resilience. He spoke of humanity's imperfections and how they often became strengths in disguise. Solara listened, occasionally nodding or asking probing questions. At one point, she asked, "If humans are so fragile compared to the beings I have encountered, why do you continue to reach for more? Why risk so much?" Kieran paused. This was a question he had asked himself many times. "Because," he said finally, "we have no choice but to try. Survival is not just about avoiding danger. It is about growth, about discovery, about leaving something behind that matters. Even failure teaches us more than inaction ever could." The Queen's eyes glowed faintly, and she tilted her head. "You speak of humans as if you have already seen all of existence, yet you have barely begun. Perhaps that is your greatest strength. You are willing to act without knowing the outcome." Kieran smiled. "It can be frightening," he admitted. "But it is also exciting. Humans are defined not by certainty, but by the willingness to face the unknown." Solara regarded him in silence for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice softer now. "You are different from the others. Most beings would have avoided me, followed protocol, or sought safety and caution. You choose otherwise. That is rare." Kieran felt a warmth in his chest, a mixture of pride and disbelief. The Queen, whose reputation inspired fear and caution across galaxies, was acknowledging him as an equal in thought, if not in status. It was a rare gift, one that humans seldom received from alien powers. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alert. The station's AI announced that an unidentified ship had entered the outer dock. Bypassing security protocols, Kieran glanced at the Queen, who remained calm, though her eyes flickered with interest. "Should we investigate?" Kieran asked. "We should observe first," Solara replied. "But pay attention, human. How you react in the presence of potential danger will tell me more than your words ever could." Kieran nodded, his pulse quickening. Humans were not naturally stealthy, but they were instinctive. He moved to the observation deck, watching the incoming ship. Its design was unfamiliar, sleek, and angular, with no markings that indicated allegiance. Solara joined him silently, her presence a steadying force. "What do you see?" she asked. "They're cautious," Kieran said. "They're scanning the station's defenses, trying to remain undetected. But they're too fast to be smugglers or traitors. I think they're here with a purpose, and it is not friendly." Solara tilted her head, a gesture Kieran had learned indicated thoughtfulness. "And what would you do if you were in command?" He considered it carefully. "I'd use the station's gravity fields to limit their movement. Trap them where they can't escape without triggering alarms. It's unconventional, but it works." She studied him for a moment, then nodded slightly. "Unconventional. That is the word I would use for humans as well." "Very well. We shall see if your instincts are correct." Kieran felt a surge of determination. He coordinated with the station's security, issuing commands to manipulate gravity fields and control docking locks. The crew followed his instructions, a mix of curiosity and skepticism in their eyes. The unknown ship approached, attempting evasive maneuvers, but Kieran's plan worked. The vessel was trapped in a controlled area, unable to move without triggering alarms. The Queen watched silently, her eyes glowing faintly, but Kieran felt a spark of approval in her gaze. The intruders were neutralized without casualties, and the station remained secure. Kieran realized then that humans had a unique advantage: their ability to improvise, to take risks, and to act decisively in moments of uncertainty. After the situation was resolved, Scylla approached him. "You humans are dangerous in ways I did not anticipate," she said. "Not with weapons, but with ingenuity, courage, and the ability to act without complete knowledge. Perhaps that is why I chose to sit beside you." Kieran felt a mixture of pride and humility. He had not sought recognition, only to survive and act as needed. Yet the Queen had noticed, and her acknowledgement meant more than he could articulate. "You see humans differently now?" he asked cautiously. "I do," she admitted. "You are unpredictable, yes, but not foolish. You adapt, you survive, and you challenge what others believe to be certain. That is impressive." Kieran smiled. "We try, at least. Sometimes we fail, but sometimes we succeed in ways no one expects." Scylla nodded slowly. "Perhaps that is the lesson of humans. You survive not because you are strongest, but because you are willing to act when others hesitate. You are remarkable." For the first time, Kieran felt that human ingenuity, courage, and curiosity had been recognized not as flaws, but as strengths. The Queen's interest was not fleeting. It was genuine, a rare acknowledgement that humans could be valued and respected in a galaxy that often underestimated them. As the day ended, Kieran walked back through the station corridors, his mind alive with possibilities. He had survived the scrutiny of one of the most intelligent and formidable beings in existence. He had proven that humans could stand out, not through sheer strength, but through courage, creativity, and fearlessness. And most importantly, he had formed a connection with the Ylthari Queen, one that would shape the rest of his journey among the stars. Kieran smiled to himself, thinking of what lay ahead. Humans had always been underestimated, but now, perhaps, they were beginning to be seen. And he, a single human among countless alien species, had taken the first step toward changing that perception forever. The morning on Sci-Fi Station began like any other, with the hum of engines, the chatter of alien traders, and the rhythmic movement of security drones. Yet, beneath the calm, tension simmered. Kieran could feel it the moment he stepped onto the observation deck. Something was different. The AI's alert system, usually quiet unless provoked, had activated overnight. Scylla was already there, her silver scales catching the soft light of the artificial sun that bathed the station. She did not speak at first, her eyes scanning the horizon of space with careful calculation. When she finally turned to Kieran, her expression was unreadable, though the faint glow in her eyes betrayed interest. "Something approaches," she said simply. "I do not know who or what, but it is neither cautious nor careless. It is deliberate." Kieran's pulse quickened, but he maintained his calm. He had faced pressure before, but this was different. This was a challenge that required quick thinking, creativity, and courage, the very qualities humans often relied upon when logic alone was insufficient. "Do we know its intent?" he asked. "Not yet," Scylla replied. "Sensors indicate it is not a standard trade vessel. Its design is alien, unfamiliar, and aggressive. It has bypassed several defensive measures. It is here for a purpose, and it is not friendly." Kieran studied the holographic display of the incoming ship. Its design was sleek, angular, and ominous, with a dark metallic hull that seemed to absorb light. He noted the vessel's movement patterns, calculating in his mind the possible strategies it might employ. Most alien commanders would have frozen at this point. Relying on protocol and defense protocols, Kieran relied on instinct. "We can use the station's gravity fields," he said thoughtfully. "If we manipulate them at key points, we can restrict the ship's movement without alerting it to our full defenses. It's risky, but it might give us time to understand its purpose." Scylla tilted her head, her gaze sharp. "Unconventional," she said, almost approvingly. "Do it, human." Show me how your kind survives under pressure. Kieran moved quickly, coordinating with the station's crew and the automated systems. He adjusted gravity fields, rerouted power to critical nodes, and set traps designed to slow or immobilize the vessel if it attempted aggressive maneuvers. The crew looked at him with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. They had been trained to follow Yilthari protocols. But Kieran's approach was unlike anything they had seen. The vessel approached, moving with precision and intent. Its sensors scanned the station. Attempting to detect weaknesses, Kieran's heart raced. But his hands moved steadily over the control panels. Every decision was calculated, yet adaptable. A combination of planning and instinct that humans often relied on in moments of uncertainty. Suddenly, the ship made a rapid maneuver, attempting to breach the docking bay. Kieran activated the first stage of his plan, manipulating the gravity fields to create an invisible barrier. The vessel collided with the altered gravity zone, forcing it to slow and adjust. Alarms blared. But the intruder was contained. Solara observed silently, her eyes glowing brighter. Kieran could feel her scrutiny, and he realized that she was testing him not with words, but with action. Could he maintain composure under real threat? Could he survive where others might panic? He activated the next phase, sealing escape routes and rerouting energy to the station's defense turrets. The intruder attempted to evade, but Kieran anticipated every movement, adapting his strategy as if he could see the vessel's intent before it acted. The crew followed his commands flawlessly, their trust in the human growing with each successful maneuver. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Kieran remained focused, his mind sharp and agile. The vessel tried one last desperate attempt to break through, accelerating toward the station's central hub. Kieran acted instantly, combining the gravity manipulation with turret targeting. The ship was immobilized, its movements halted without a single casualty. The room fell silent. Kieran's chest heaved slightly, but he maintained his calm exterior. Solara approached him, her presence commanding yet not intimidating. She regarded him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken, though it was a different kind of pressure than the one from the incoming threat. "You humans are remarkable," she said softly. "Not with sheer strength, not with overwhelming force, but with strategy, adaptability, and courage. You survived where others might have failed." Kieran felt a mixture of relief and pride. He had not acted to impress the Queen, but the acknowledgement from her was profound. Humans were often underestimated, their abilities judged by appearances and technology alone. Yet here, his ingenuity and courage had been recognized and respected by one of the most intelligent beings in the galaxy. "Thank you," he said simply. I did what I thought was best. I did what I thought was best." Solara nodded slowly. "And that is exactly why I chose to sit beside you yesterday. I wanted to see if your words matched your actions. Today, they have. Humans are unpredictable. Yes, but not without reason. That makes you dangerous, in the best sense." Kieran felt a surge of confidence, but also humility. He knew that surviving this encounter did not mean the galaxy would accept humans as equals, nor that danger would cease to find them. Yet, he also realized that humans had a unique strength, an ability to adapt, improvise, and succeed in situations where others relied solely on rigid rules. As the intruder vessel remained contained, Solara gestured for Kieran to follow her to a private chamber. The room was smaller than the royal hall but no less impressive. Light shimmered off the metallic walls, creating patterns that shifted as they moved. It was quiet here, a stark contrast to the chaos of the docking bay. "You acted decisively," she said, her tone reflective. "Most beings hesitate when faced with the unknown. They cling to protocol, to tradition, to what is safe. You did not. That is a rare quality." Kieran nodded. "Humans have always had to adapt to survive. We learn from failure, we improvise, and we act when others hesitate. It is not perfect, but it works." Solara's gaze softened slightly, her glowing eyes focusing on him with genuine interest. It works, indeed. And perhaps that is why I am intrigued by your kind. Most beings are predictable, even intelligent ones. Humans, you defy expectations. You survive where others would fail. Kieran felt a warmth in his chest. This was more than acknowledgement. It was respect. Rare and valuable. Coming from a being whose judgment was legendary across the stars. The conversation shifted to strategy and cooperation. Solara spoke of her concerns regarding other alien factions, their ambitions, and their potential threats. Kieran offered suggestions based on human logic and experience, emphasizing flexibility and creativity. She listened carefully, occasionally challenging his ideas. But there was a clear respect in her demeanor. You think differently, she observed. Most would approach these problems with rigidity. You consider variables others ignore, and you act decisively. That is a combination I have not seen often. Kieran smiled. Sometimes the unexpected approach is the best approach. Humans survive because we are willing to act when others are frozen by protocol or fear. Solara nodded slowly. Perhaps that is why your presence here is important. Humans may be young in interstellar politics, but you possess qualities that even older races can learn from, if they are willing to observe. Kieran felt a surge of pride, tempered by the awareness of the challenges ahead. Humans had earned a measure of respect, but the galaxy was vast, and danger was never far. Yet, for the first time, he felt that humans had a real place among the stars, not as passive participants, but as valuable, capable, and respected contributors. Their discussion was interrupted by a transmission from the station's command center. Reports indicated that the intruder vessel's crew had attempted communication, sending an automated request for parley. Kieran and Solara exchanged a glance. This was unexpected. Do you think they intend to negotiate? Kieran asked cautiously. Perhaps, Solara replied. Or perhaps they are testing us. Either way, humans will need to remain vigilant. Observation is as important as action. Kieran nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Humans had proven themselves capable, but they could not rely solely on luck or instinct. They had to combine courage with strategy and action with thought. As he prepared to meet the intruders, Kieran reflected on the day's events. He had faced an unknown threat, acted decisively, and gained the respect of the Ylthari Queen. Humans were often underestimated, yet their unpredictability, creativity, and courage allowed them to thrive where others might fail. And perhaps, he realized, that was exactly why the Queen had chosen to sit beside him in the first place. Not because of rank or protocol, but because humans were capable of something extraordinary. Something that even the most advanced alien minds could not fully anticipate. Kieran stepped forward, ready to face the incoming delegation, aware that his actions would define not only his future but the perception of humanity in this part of the galaxy. He was no longer just a human observer. He was a representative of a species that was clever, courageous, and capable of standing alongside the greatest beings in the stars. The intruder's ship docked, their crew emerging cautiously. Kieran moved beside Solara, prepared to engage, aware that every choice he made could shift the balance of respect, trust, and survival. He felt a surge of determination. Humans had survived countless challenges throughout history, and this was just another. Whatever happened next, Kieran knew one thing for certain. Humans were capable of more than any alien had expected, and the galaxy was about to witness it firsthand. The docking bay was alive with tension. The unknown delegation had emerged from their ship, their movements precise, cautious, and deliberate. Kieran walked beside Solara, his senses alert, every instinct tuned to anticipate the unexpected. The air was thick with anticipation, not just from the humans present, but from the many alien species observing from higher platforms. This was not merely a meeting. It was a moment that could define humanity's reputation in this corner of the galaxy. The delegation approached the central chamber where Solara had arranged a neutral space for negotiation. Kieran noticed subtle signs of hesitation in their posture, indications that they were unsure of how to proceed. Unlike most humans, who relied on brute force or intimidation, he relied on observation and insight. Humans had survived for millennia not by strength alone, but by adaptability, creativity, and courage. Those qualities had brought him here, and they would serve him now. "Greetings," Solara said, her melodic voice filling the chamber. "You have arrived unannounced, yet I trust you understand the consequences of your actions." The lead representative of the delegation inclined its head. Its body shimmered with a metallic hue, and its eyes glowed faintly. "We seek parley," it said in a mechanical tone, "to understand the terms of engagement and avoid unnecessary conflict." Kieran stepped forward slightly, his posture calm yet confident. "Humans appreciate honesty and clarity," he said. "We believe communication can prevent misunderstandings that often lead to unnecessary danger. It is not weakness to speak, but strength." The delegation seemed to consider his words. Kieran could feel Solara's presence beside him, calm yet alert. He realized that her choice to engage him directly in these negotiations was deliberate. She was testing not just his abilities, but the qualities of humanity itself. Over the next several hours, Kieran and Solara engaged the delegation in careful discussion. The aliens questioned, probed, and even attempted subtle intimidation, but Kieran responded with calm reasoning, clear logic, and a subtle human intuition that surprised even the Queen. He proposed solutions that were fair but firm, ensuring that the delegation understood both the consequences of aggression and the value of cooperation. Solara observed silently, occasionally nodding or interjecting with a clarifying question. Kieran could feel her approval growing. Every human quality he displayed, courage, intelligence, adaptability, and honesty, was being noted. More than that, it was being respected. He realized that this was not just about survival, it was about proving that humans could be valued members of the interstellar community. The delegation finally signaled agreement, and the atmosphere shifted. Relief spread through the chamber, and Kieran allowed himself a small smile. It had not been an easy encounter, but humans had held their ground. Not through aggression, but through cleverness and courage. After the delegation departed, Solara led Kieran to a private observation platform overlooking the station. The glow of distant stars reflected in her eyes, and for a moment, there was silence. The weight of recent events settled over them. Yet it was not tense, it was reflective, almost peaceful. "You have performed well," she said quietly. "Not just today, but since our first meeting. You speak of humans as if you understand them deeply. Yet you live by those principles yourself. That is rare." Kieran felt a surge of humility. He had acted as he believed humans should act, honestly, bravely, and creatively. But hearing it acknowledged by one of the greatest minds in the galaxy was something entirely different. "Thank you," he said simply. "I have only acted as I believed necessary." Humans survive by facing the unknown, by adapting when situations demand it. Perhaps that is all we can do. Solara regarded him thoughtfully. "Adaptation, courage, creativity. These are traits your kind possesses in abundance. Most species rely on tradition, protocol, and predictability. Humans, you challenge those norms. You survive where others falter. That is why I chose to sit beside you in the first place." Kieran felt a strange warmth. The Queen's words were more than praise, they were recognition. Humans had long been underestimated, judged by appearances and limitations. Yet here, in the presence of one of the galaxy's most formidable beings, Kieran felt that human potential had been acknowledged and respected. Over the following days, Kieran worked closely with Solara and her council. Humans were invited to share insights, propose strategies, and contribute to decisions affecting the station and surrounding territories. Kieran noticed the subtle change in the way other species regarded humans. Respect replaced skepticism. Curiosity replaced caution. Humans were no longer just observers, they were participants, capable of influencing outcomes in ways that others had not expected. One evening, Kieran found himself alone with Solara on a quiet observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before them, a tapestry of light and darkness. He turned to her, feeling both humility and pride. "Why me?" he asked. "Why not another human? Or someone more experienced in diplomacy?" Solara regarded him with her glowing eyes, her expression unreadable yet sincere. "Because you embody what your species often fails to recognize in itself. Courage, creativity, honesty, and adaptability. You act without certainty, yet your actions are deliberate. That is rare, not just among humans, but among all beings I have encountered. I saw something worth observing, and perhaps learning from." Kieran smiled. "I never thought of myself that way. I just do what feels right. And that," Solara said softly, "is why humans are remarkable. Not because you follow rules, not because you are strongest or fastest, but because you act, think, and survive in ways that even we cannot fully predict. That is your greatest strength." For the first time, Kieran felt the weight of human potential in a tangible way. The galaxy was vast, full of races older and more advanced than humanity. Yet humans possessed a combination of qualities that made them unique: courage tempered by creativity, intelligence guided by instinct, and the willingness to act in the face of uncertainty. The days turned into weeks, and Kieran continued to work closely with Solara and her advisors. Humans were increasingly respected across the station, their contributions valued in discussions of trade, security, and diplomacy. Kieran realized that he had become more than a representative of Earth, he had become a symbol of humanity's potential. One afternoon, as he reviewed reports of interstellar trade routes, Solara approached him with a rare smile. "You have done well, human," she said. "Your presence has changed perceptions, not just among humans, but across species. I did not expect this level of impact from one individual. Yet here we are." Kieran felt a mixture of pride and humility. "I could not have done it alone," he said. "It is humans as a whole that deserve recognition. I am only a representative." Solara nodded. "True. But sometimes it only takes one to show the rest what is possible. You have done that." Kieran looked out at the stars, thinking of Earth and the countless humans living on it. They were often underestimated, judged by their size, technology, or apparent inexperience. Yet humans had endured, thrived, and achieved more than any species had predicted. That same spirit had carried him through this journey, and it had earned the respect of a being who had observed countless species for centuries. As the sun of the station's artificial system set, casting long shadows across the observation deck, Kieran felt a profound sense of purpose. Humanity had taken a small but meaningful step into the broader galaxy. They had shown that courage, ingenuity, and adaptability were qualities to be respected, not underestimated. Solara spoke again, her voice soft but carrying weight. "I once believed humans to be unpredictable to the point of recklessness. But now, I see that unpredictability is not weakness, it is strength. It allows you to survive, to adapt, and to thrive in ways that even the oldest and wisest species cannot anticipate. That is why humans will always be remarkable." Kieran nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate deeply. For centuries, humans had been underestimated, judged by appearances and limitations. Yet here, in the eyes of the galaxy's most intelligent and discerning beings, they had earned acknowledgement, respect, and the promise of a future defined not by fear, but by potential. And in that moment, Kieran understood something fundamental. Humanity was capable of greatness, not despite its flaws, but because of its willingness to act, adapt, and endure. Humans could survive and thrive where others might fail, not by being perfect, but by being bold, clever, and courageous. As he stood beside the Queen, Looking out over the vast expanse of stars, Kieran felt a sense of connection that transcended species. He was no longer just a human diplomat. He was a representative of a species whose ingenuity, bravery, and determination had finally been recognized on a scale worthy of its potential. The galaxy was full of challenges, conflicts, and unknown dangers. But humans had proven, through courage, creativity, and action, that they could meet those challenges head-on. And Kieran, standing beside the Ylthari Queen, knew that this was only the beginning. Whatever the future held, humanity had taken its first true steps into the wider galaxy, not as passive observers, but as capable, respected, and remarkable participants. And for Kieran, who had been warned to stay away from the Queen, the journey had become far greater than he could have imagined. It was a journey that would shape the perception of humanity for generations to come, a story of courage, ingenuity, and the enduring power of being human. As night fell on Scifi Station, the stars outside glittered like diamonds scattered across a vast, dark sea. Kieran took a deep breath, feeling a sense of pride, purpose, and belonging. Humans had finally begun to show the galaxy who they truly were. And for the first time, Kieran felt that the impossible was within reach. And so, the story ended not with conquest or domination, but with recognition, respect, and hope. A reminder that humans, in all their unpredictability and resilience, could stand alongside the greatest minds and beings in the universe, shaping the future with courage, ingenuity, and the enduring spirit of humanity.